Hey everybody, this is Patrick from the Liberty Principle Podcast. I'm starting a new series. It's called New Derp Courses, which is going to basically cover the wacky adventures of James Lindsay as he descends into Gnostic wizardry madness. We're going to get off to a quick start right here. I'm going to show a video. It's a new video that James just released called What Woke Really Means. And I'm going to use James' words against him, his redefining of woke. I'm going to use this against him to prove that by his own definition of woke, he can be made to look woke and that he is woke. And then I'm going to go into something more substantial at the end that involves him also being woke. So let's go.
But I think this is the most distilled explanation of what it means to be woke. What you woke up to, what you're awake to, not just a critical consciousness without explaining what that means, or a class consciousness as it was for Marx. He says that Hegel's dialectic outlines and gets right the idea of supersession by retraction of alienation into the self. That, to me, is the woke disposition.
So for James, the ultimate defining, and he's going to go on to define what he believes woke to be is here, is that your alienation, you as a group, with your ideals, your philosophies, who you identify as, you have become alienated, and you retract that, internalize that into yourself. And that's one of the main things that he describes as woke. Okay, let's keep going.
In a single sentence, woke means that you have superseded yourself. You have gone beyond yourself. You have transcended yourself. You have gone higher than yourself by the retraction of alienation into yourself. What does that mean? How does that work? Well, you're taking a sense of being alienated and bringing it into yourself, retracting it into yourself, defining yourself in terms of that alienation. So
James's entire project is trying to, well, a part of his project is trying to revive classical liberalism. His thesis, hypothesis, whatever you want to call it, is basically that classical liberalism has been marginalized. Classical liberalism has been bastardized and corrupted, and for at least 100 years, or if not more. And in its place, the people that identify as liberals are not actually liberals. They're just woke communists, woke Fabian socialists, like the Democrats, whatever you want to call them. So his stance is that the classical liberal ethos, the ideology, the philosophy behind it, which he strictly identifies with. He once made a post about how you must be liberty first, and that liberty comes before Christ because you can't have a Christian faith without the ability to profess the faith. And so he said liberty must come first. So, and James's entire stance, as I said, is that liberalism has been alienated and subverted and replaced with a progressive ideology. James has internalized that and feels that he has been repressed, that his ideology, his brand, his flavor of classical liberalism has been oppressed and marginalized, and he has internalized that inside himself. So far, you can argue that James Lindsay is woke based on the short definition that he has given. Let's keep going.
The woke mindset is one that defines itself in terms of alienation, but it doesn't just feel alienated. Woe is me. It is woe is us.
Woe is us. The classical liberals like to say that they're not a collective, that they're a group of individuals. But it's like, okay, but you're a group of individuals. You're in a group, and you're classical liberals. If you talk to the James Lindsay, they're called the Lindsayyites, James Lindsay's fans and followers, it is similar to talking to a leftist in that they are basically a part of a hive mind. It's like talking to a bunch of little James Lindsays. So his group, his identity, his sense of self has been marginalized, and he now identifies with that sense of alienation and marginalization.
Because you are superseding yourself for what? A group identity. The sense of alienation that woke teaches is that some identity group to which you belong is.
You identify as a classical liberal. You are a classical liberal. Not in the exact same way, but in terms of how you identify, similar to if somebody identifies as a communist, as a progressive, as a Christian, as a Muslim, as a Jew. You identify as that. So this is his identity. It is his group identity. They try to play dialectics and say that they're each individuals, but no, they are a part of a larger collective.
Alienated from full participation in society. That's the intrinsic idea of class conflict at the basis of all of Marx's thinking. For my socio-Gnostic hypothesis, it is the basis of socio-Gnosticism that there is a powerful ruling class that alienates and exploits a lower class that doesn't get to experience itself as it really is. It doesn't get.
So James's one of the main things he says is that he'll call them globalists or Gnostics or socio-Gnostics, that a nefarious cabal of individuals, globalists, have conspired to, using technology, now they have the ability to do it, they have conspired to slowly take over the world. And in order to take over the world, they must oppress liberals, classical liberals. Now, everybody gets oppressed, but James Lindsay believes that classical liberalism is the best bulwark, the best defense against this globalist Gnostic incursion. So James Lindsay is already participating in oppressor-oppressed dialectics. He always has. He'll go on later to talk about how many people cast the Jews in this position. But you can empty out the contents of what Jews supposedly do or don't do and just enter globalist or Gnostic, and you essentially get the same flavor of oppressor-oppressed dynamics. So far we have two really good examples that James Lindsay is essentially calling himself woke here.
To experience itself as truly human in the literal sense or in the.
And James Lindsay believes that to be truly human is to be classically liberal. Because of the belief system, he believes that it is, if not the truth, the closest we can possibly get to the truth. So to be truly human is to be a liberal, to believe in liberty, to be free. And I'm not even saying I disagree or agree with the different components of this. That's not the purpose of this episode. I'm just trying to show you that by James Lindsay's own definition of what he considers to be woke, he fits the bill exactly. Right? Each person who has a belief system can do this. You believe you're being oppressed. You believe that your view is being marginalized, that you believe that your view is true or as true as you can possibly get to. And so if you have that lens, that worldview, what you believe to be true is being oppressed. And there are oppressors that are trying to oppress you. Christians believe this. Muslims believe this with the bombings over in Europe. The Jews believe this. Leftists, LGBTQ, Black people, all of these people believe this. So James Lindsay does fit nicely into this category of viewing the world through oppressor and oppressed. And the idea that your belief system has been marginalized and people are trying to hide this truth from you to keep you from becoming fully human.
Social sense, because it is being exploited by a higher class, an upper class, a bourgeois class for the Marxists.
Gnostics or globalists for James Lindsay.
That is operating like kind of like the false society or world constructing god called the demiurge, the demon of the.
Now, this is really interesting. James Lindsay looks at everything through Gnosticism. It's largely based on Kabbalistic metaphysics. They don't view reality so much as a prison as they view that there are these divine sparks that are hidden within all of us in these husks, in these klipoth, and we must essentially we must heal society. We must get rid of all of the contradictions of society in order to unearth these divine sparks. James Lindsay specifically frames it as being Gnostic. And while there are Gnostic elements to the Lurianic, Kabbalistic, occult faith, there are Gnostic elements to it. It's not exactly Gnosticism. So I'm pretty sure James has been lying about that from day one. And the reason why he's lying, I believe, is because if you trace it back far enough, it gets to Kabbalah. And, you know, Kabbalah, there's lots of different Kabbalists. There's Christian Kabbalists, but Kabbalah is very large in the Jewish populace. And this concept of tikkun olam, of healing the world to unearth these divine sparks. And once you unearth the divine sparks, they all return back to its source, which they view as this sort of endless, this endless nothingness. They call it Ein Sof. That's what Kabbalists believe. So James, I'm pretty sure James has been purposely misleading his audience, because I'm pretty sure he thinks that if he goes down the Kabbalah route, it's just going to demonize Jews and work towards another Jewish pogrom, which we'll get into later on.
Gnostic faith. Now, I don't want to get off into those weeds. This is beside the point. The point is that there is this sense of being alienated. The Gnostic thing is really important, because what's alienating you is the alien who alienates, and the alien who alienates you is this upper class, but you are going to leave yourself as an individual behind and supersede yourself to see yourself as a member of a class, a dialectical transformation of yourself.
He's just describing the dialectical transformation of himself in knowing that he is a classical liberal, and all classical liberals as a collective, as a group, are being oppressed. That's all he's doing here.
In critical race theory, I've said that the basic point of critical race theory is to believe that the fundamental organizing principle of society is a system of racism that is not easily overcome. That the
James Lindsay believes that the single overriding principle that which society is run by is that classical liberalism has been oppressed, and we must highlight our roots and where we came from in order to save Western society and return it back to its original vision. That's exactly what he believes. Exactly what he believes. Turn it back to its original vision. That's exactly what he believes.
Fundamental organizing principle of society to queer theory is normativity, whether cis normativity or heteronormativity or normativity in general, or thin.
Again, Gnostics, Hermetics, globalists, that is essentially James Lindsay's normativity. Queer theory believes that normativity is oppressive, that these false structures are placed on us, and we must alleviate these false structures and queer all of society until nothing is normal. James Lindsay wants to do the same thing. He just wants to get away from the progressive hellscape we're in and get back to a classically liberal foundation.
To that normative structure. But it's still...
Really quick, take a shot every time he says the word structure. You'll be dead a half an hour in. I hate the way he says it. It's not as annoying as Candace Owens going, Israel. But she obviously has some sort of speech impediment. But structure, the way he says it, structure. It's like he pronounces the C in the word structure three times. Like there's like 3 counts there. Structure. It's insufferable.
If I were to say to the average man on the street, all right, you've probably heard the term woke. What does it mean? They would probably say it means identity politics. They might add on the left, but they would say it means identity politics. And the reason that it means identity politics is that the fundamental basis for what we mean by woke is that you woke up to a new view of yourself rooted in identity politics, rooted in a sense of class-oriented or...
That's what James Lindsay was. James Lindsay voted for Barack Obama. I don't know if he voted for Hillary, but he voted for Barack Obama. He was a progressive, just kind of like a typical shit lib. And he then awoke to the fact that the world is controlled by globalists and hermetics and Gnostics. He awoke to that fact and then began seeking out esoteric information in regards to the philosophy in which that was used to create the United States, which we'll get into more a little bit later once he goes into other facets of what he believes ultimately defines woke.
The identity politics is not a primary understanding of what woke is. It is a phenomenon of woke. It is secondary. It is derivative to the sense of alienation and the
Now, the reason why he's saying that it's derivative, and I'm not commenting on if that's true or not, the reason why he's saying it's secondary is because he needs woke to be as empty and hollow. You could even say that his theory of woke is a theory without essence, to paraphrase the queer theorist David Halpern. He needs this to be as empty and as possible in order to broadly apply it to to people that he identifies as woke right. Woke, he narrows it down here and is very specific with what woke is, but his specificity is kind of like a little bit of a ruse and a guise, because it's very specific, but it's specific in a way that that allows only James Lindsay to describe what woke is. That's what he's trying to do here. He needs to empty out its contents in order for him to be able to be the one who decides what is and what is not woke.
You get to all of that class conflict based stuff that's out there. In other words, what you get to is the friend enemy distinction in politics, as it got called by Carl Schmitt. You now have groups or tribes of individuals who see themselves in terms of their group or tribe, who see their situation as alienated, robbed of their full potential, therefore existential. As Marx says,
James Lindsay believes that anyone can adhere to classically liberal tenets because the tenets in classical liberalism are inherently true. This is what he believes. And so he basically believes that leftists and, progressives and woke people have stripped people of their ability in order to actually discern reality. And of course, the only way to properly discern reality is through either Scottish common sense realism or some other form of realism. Basically, to James, if you do not view the world through his lens, that means that you're woke. That's the reason. That's the whole reason he's doing this. He did this so he could be the grand wizard, the czar of woke, and label anyone that does not agree with him as woke. It's kind of like with the critical race theorists. What did James Lindsay say? Critical race theory is just calling something racist until you control it. When James Lindsay wants to control everything, he wants to make all of right-wing politics of conservative politics as classically liberal, because he believes that the country was founded on classical liberal principles, which is, of course, is true. That's fine. That's true. But James Lindsay is purposely reframing woke. He's using dialectics, wizardry, to redesign and redefine what woke is so he can control it. James Lindsay needs to control what woke is because James Lindsay needs you to see reality in the exact same way that he does. And anyone that does not see reality in the exact same way that he does is an enemy. James Lindsay and his followers play by the friend-enemy distinction all the time. All the time.
You are not truly human. You're not allowed to be human. You aren't allowed to exist as you were supposed to exist because you're alienated from your true social, which is to say your true human nature, by this process of socio-gnostic alienation. Now, Marx doesn't call it socio-gnostic, I do, but that's beside the point. So this is an existential situation of your group in conflict with the other group that's alienating you, or that alienates in general, or maybe there's a melange of groups. There's several groups that are all kind of competing with one another, but because of this intrinsic class conflict. So we start with the sense of alienation, which is rooted in an entitlement complex. You get the entitlement complex, you get people to feel alienated by it. You get them to identify as a member of a group that is alienated by this power dynamic that's generated by the class conflict, and you have them believing in class conflict and identity politics now. And identity politics doesn't mean civil rights, by the way. It doesn't mean advocating on behalf of a genuinely oppressed minority. It means this. It means this.
Now that's interesting. So James Lindsay says that anyone that engages in white identity politics is woke. So I don't know when Lindsay posted this, but he posted, on November 27th, 2025, just a couple months ago. Black victimhood culture sucks. Gay victimhood culture sucks. Female victim culturehood sucks. And then he goes on and just say all the things that suck. Muslim victimhood, Christian victimhood, male victimhood, straight victimhood, white victimhood, straight white victimhood sucks. And then if you see down here, somebody goes, making a Jewish joke, oy vey, you miss one, I'm sure by accident. And then James Lindsay says, count the characters. Of course, he's lying. He is trolling. He specifically left out the Jewish one for multiple reasons. One of the reasons is to troll the people that are obsessed with Jews and that want to discuss Jewish influence in communist actions and globalist actions. He purposely left that out. James Lindsay has a blue mark. You've seen his long, bloviating posts, thousands and thousands of words. He could have put Jewish victimhood culture sucks. He didn't. He specifically didn't because he does not believe that Jews have a victimhood culture. James Lindsay applies the way that James Lindsay looks at Jewish people is the way that a leftist looks at a trans person. A leftist believes that a trans person is truly oppressed. And so they should have a seat at the table and people should hear their grievances. James Lindsay views Jewish people as explicitly oppressed. So he doesn't think that they're playing identity politics. And he doesn't think that it's woke when when a Jewish person or a Jewish ally calls somebody anti-Semitic. He doesn't think that that's woke because he actually believes that Jewish people are oppressed and Jewish people are in danger. He specifically left this out. What's interesting about this is that there is no more oppressed group in America than white people, specifically white, Christian, straight males. But anyone who tries to talk about white identity at all, even if they're not white nationalists, I'm not a white nationalist. I'm not a white supremacist. I don't even really consider myself a white identitarian. I consider myself a Christian first. Strictly white nationalist identitarian, like epistemology and metaphysics, clash with Christian metaphysics. I believe that a black man who is a Christian is like a brother. He is my brother in Christ. So I don't know if I could ever get myself to exclude someone based on their race. However, I know that I most likely like to live in white neighborhoods. Is that because I think that black people are inferior to me? No. I just know that the black populace is more plagued by crime. So there's a much greater likelihood of being afflicted by crime, having to live through poverty, experience all these horrible things if you move into a black neighborhood. So I'm more likely to live in a white neighborhood. I'm also aware that they literally changed the definition of racism so they could openly discriminate against whites. I know they did that. I know that there are tons of books about whiteness and abolishing whiteness. There are Joy Reid had a show on MSNBC where she would express her vehement hatred towards white people every single day. White hatred is so prevalent in society that it is not only accepted, but it is celebrated. People feel guilty of being white. The woke leftists literally created the concept of white privilege, that we are in whiteness, that we are born with this. It is our original sin. And there's nothing that you could ever do to alleviate that sin. You're always going to have that sin. So you must defer to quote unquote marginalized groups and listen to them and do what they say and do what they want in order to try to move past your whiteness, while at the same time knowing that you can never move past your whiteness. James Lindsay once said that he believed that the rhetoric around white people and whiteness is grounds for determining that this is essentially pre-genocidal language. They're attaching an ideology of whiteness to white people and white Christians specifically. And even though all white people are guilty of this, even the good whites, the white leftists and the white liberals, they don't like them either. But James Lindsay has explicitly stated that we were heading in a direction of normalizing genocidal rhetoric towards white people. Add in affirmative action, DEI policies, restorative justice, the fact that Black people represent 13% of the population, and yet just in sheer numbers, they more than double the amount of Black on white murders every year, the white on Black murders. This is all very normalized, and James Lindsay has acknowledged this. And yet, even if you're not a Nazi, even if you're just someone that wants to talk about what's happening to white people and talk about it with other people and white people in order to advocate for yourself and your race, your skin color, your ethnicity, whatever you want to say, James Lindsay will call that woke because he believes that it's identity politics. And yet, when Jewish people do that, he's completely fine with it and explicitly, purposely leaves them out of his post about how all of this victimhood culture sucks. James Lindsay is actually a danger to Jewish people. He's putting them in danger by doing this. We'll get into that a little bit later. Let's continue with his podcast.
It is a group-based existential group conflict or class conflict justifies Machiavellianism. So all of a sudden you get to this kind of dark tetrad space as a result. All this derivative stuff, cancel culture, double standard.
Now, of course, James Lindsay is deploying Machiavellian tactics here in his redefining of woke by emptying the original contents of woke so he can more broadly apply it to people that he does not like, rather say his enemies as opposed to his friends. James Lindsay is purposely engaging in dialectics. He's changing the definitions of things, just like the woke did with racism, just like they did with what a woman or man is, what makes a woman a woman, and what makes a man a man. He's engaging in Machiavellian tactics and demonizing everyone, not even people that are overtly evil, just people with different ideas, some different ideas that might help restructure society in any kind of way. That's what James Lindsay is doing. He's using Machiavellian tactics, and then yet he's decrying people that engage in the same Machiavellian tactics. So makes him a hypocrite as well. And hypocrisy is definitely, obviously, it's not just it's not, all woke people are hypocrites, but not all hypocrites are woke, if that makes sense.
Standards, reward our friends and punish our enemies. Lying, the ends justify the means, lying in order to gain political power, hiding your power level, so to.
James Lindsay is lying. He's lying about what woke is. He's lying about certain things that involve the origins of woke, its Kabbalistic origins. He's straying away from calling out Kabbalah and just calling it Gnostic. He's purposely lying about that because he believes that it is for the greater good, and he believes that it could help him win. He's lying about all of this. It's just objectively so.
Speak, not showing your true face. All this Machiavellian politics is also downstream from what? This intrinsic sense of alienation. Nietzsche and others describe this in terms of something called slave morality. When you believe that the society, I think Hegel described it that way too, is split fundamentally into.
James Lindsay's a big fan of this. He just sometimes what he says, sometimes the connections he makes are good and useful, but a lot of the times, he's a giant nerd and he knows all of these different things. So he incorporates all these different thinkers into what he's saying in order to lend what he is saying some sort of sense of legitimacy. It honestly reminds me of what a trans activist talks about brain scans and about people that are born hermaphrodites and how all of this different sort of at least something approaching more hard science than just gender as a social construct and whatever you say you are is what you are. They use all of that in order to try to legitimize the nonsense that they're saying about what gender actually is. James Lindsay's using the exact same thing here.
And so the Machiavellianism, the cancel culture, the double standards, and so on, the ends justify the means logic are all.
James Lindsay loves cancel culture. He pretends that he doesn't participate in cancel culture, but guess what? Everybody participates in cancel culture. You don't like some people. You want to demonize them. You want to demonize their ideas. You want to call them woke. You want to call them anti-Semitic. You want to call them fascists. You want to call them Nazis. I have no problem with cancel culture in and of itself in terms of I don't like these people and I would like to defeat them. And by defeating them, I also defeat their ideas. I have no problem with that, but James Lindsay pretends as if he does not engage in that, and that is just not the case. So again, what James Lindsay is describing as woke is he is basically just describing himself. Let's keep going.
Derivative to this sense of alienation. So like I said, what's primary here, if we just.
Now see, James Lindsay's going through all of these things, and then he's drawing it back to that sense of alienation, which to him is what the core of woke is. So he has to take all of these different things that it can apply to so many different people in so many different cases. And the more you do that, well, the more things you create that you can apply, the more you supposedly bolster your own theory. It's making it appear to his listeners as if, oh, I see, he's drawing it back to the sense of alienation, where in actuality, the things that he's saying, these other facets of woke, can be drawn back to other concepts. Nothing that is even appearing woke could be drawn back to different ideas. That's what he's doing here. He's casting a very broad net and labeling these things and acting as if it's somehow bolstering his own theory. It's just pure sophistry.
Walk it all the way back as you have a largely manufactured entitlement complex that's turned into a narrative about alienation until it becomes a sense of alienation. And that alienation is then identified with a group, and that identity is retracted into yourself. So you no longer see yourself as an individual with individual rights. You see yourself as a member of a group that is alienated from full participation.
Now, see, a white person can look at the society that is around them and how it hates them and how it's demonizing them, how the president of the United States against a red backdrop that looked like as if he was in like Satan's lair. Like I was expecting Saddam Hussein from South Park to walk by. James Lindsay, like a white person could look at all of that, and then he's going to want to talk to other people about it. Well, who's he going to talk to about it with? I don't know so much if the general black populace is going to want to hear that, especially since the majority of black people themselves have a woke victim complex, and they largely blame white society for it. So, there's not too many people that are going to want to hear that. So if you're a white person that is interested in that, you just want to talk about it because it's kind of scary. For me, when I woke up, I used to be woke. I used to be super like an insane leftist. When I woke up, oh my God, I'm woke. When I realized what was going on and like the insane demonization around white people and how, whiteness was being used to cast white people as the main villains of society, as the colonizers, as the oppressors. When I realized this was happening, honestly, it scared me. It felt like I woke up. Oh, I'm woke. It felt like I woke up in a different reality. I guess it's the red pill, right? It's the Matrix. You're coming out of the pod and you pull the giant thing that's feeding you out of your mouth, and all of a sudden you're in a different reality. That's what it felt like to me. Now, who am I going to want to talk to? Probably other white people about it. It's like, hey, do you see this? Do you see how this is kind of scary? Like, they don't seem to like us very much, and they're demonizing us. And it seems like there's some rather, as James Lindsay once said, genocidal rhetoric aimed at white people. This is kind of scary. So you could create a group of white people and start talking about that. That doesn't mean that you have to turn into Hitler. That doesn't mean that you have to hate other groups. If you have a well-rounded understanding of how each group is manipulated based on their own race, and that actually creates a kind of empathy. You can go back and look throughout history and see black people be manipulated by communists to essentially exploit the oppression that they were facing, being marginalized, being separated from society, people being like overtly like hateful towards them based on the color of their own skin. If you find out the true history of that, to me, the more knowledge about this, at least for me, actually breeds less contempt and less hatred, right? So if you get a group of white people together and say you want to advocate for yourself because you're a white person, but then also these other white people that are also being oppressed and being targeted with genocidal rhetoric, James Lindsay thinks that's woke because he doesn't believe that you're actually being oppressed by being white, even though there are thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of examples of white people, white, straight Christians being marginalized in this country. And yet, if you don't look at it through the exact lens that James Lindsay wants you to look at, that means you're woke. What's ironic is that once I started realizing all of this insane rhetoric that was being spewed all over society and accepted as normal, once I realized that, James Lindsay actually helped me to not be hateful towards other groups. And yet now, if I want to talk about that and maybe, I don't know, collectivize around my skin color, but at least like I said, I'm a Christian, but at the same time, right? At the same time, there is a material reality that I'm so pasty. If you could see me right now, I'm so pasty that I'm basically pink. There is a material reality of my skin color and the way society has been formed. And a lot of people hate me and other people that look like me because of my skin color. So I believe that you can be a Christian and not immediately turn into Hitler if you want to discuss with other white people your grievances. In fact, I believe that, it would take some sort of mass awakening, which is never going to happen. We're just going to, all clash eventually, and it's going to be a giant calamity in terms of the other races and groups. But I do believe that if a white person and a black person came to the table and they had a discussion, a series of discussions, if they were level-headed and not just purely insane, they could come to some sort of understanding to realize that while the way our skin color has been used against us is different, the level of oppression and of assault on us as individuals and as a group is very similar. And people could come to those conclusions, and it would actually make people of different skin colors not hate each other. And yet James Lindsay will not give credence, or he does not want to allow white people to do that, because some guy named Rapist Scraper 69 Will Stancil Honda Fit Minneapolis Jew post some spicy memes online. Because of these people, I cannot get together with other white people to discuss how we're being marginalized based on our skin color. It's just absurd. And his stance on this is making things worse. If you listen to Nick Fuentes, I'm not a big fan of Nick Fuentes, but if you listen to Fuentes, he says a lot of true stuff that is happening in the country based on race and the history surrounding that. He says a lot of other inflammatory stuff. I have problems with him theologically. He's a Roman Catholic. I'm an Orthodox Christian, but he says a lot of things that are true. However, if you had a less inflammatory person advocating for white politics, white cultural politics, that would actually help the situation and make things better. And yet James Lindsay would most likely lump me in with Nick Fuentes and just call me woke right, which of course is just radicalizing people further and pushing them in a negative direction. He's making everything worse by what he's doing.
In society by some alien force that is alienating you, that is illegitimate.
Dear Lord, how many times has he said the words alien or alienating? God, I'm pretty sure he says structure a couple more times. Let's keep going.
Justifying the conflict theory, the identity politics, Machiavellianism, the friend-enemy distinction, and so on. So all of that.
All of things which you participate in, James.
Stuff we think of as woke, all the bad behavior, is all derivative to fundamentally seeing yourself as alienated.
Yes, James, because you came up with this definition. So all things woke must be downstream from the thing that you identified as being the sole factor of what makes someone woke. Of course. Right? James must call everyone woke until he controls what is woke. Critical James theory. That's what we're going to call it. Critical James theory.
That sense of alienation is fundamentally derived from a manufactured entitlement complex. People like you, that's your group, deserve to be a certain way. So we talk about the...
James is a classical liberal. James is a James Lindsay classical liberal, because John Locke would have had James Lindsay imprisoned or executed. Okay, James, there is a lot of different flavors of classical liberalism, and a lot of the people that came up with classical liberalism would think that James was a heretic and a gay progressive. That's what they would think.
What about the right? Well, there's different ways. The easy one to see is this whole conspiracy theory of the woke, by the way, is just the same conspiracy theory as anti-Semitism, that the Jews are these...
What? Now we're getting into it. Let's go!
Powerful characters that do shadowy things and control the world, is the same as saying the whites are these shadowy characters.
Okay, so saying that the Jews control the world for the anti-Semites and the woke right is the same for the woke left saying that the whites control the world. But James saying that the Gnostics and Hermeticists and globalists controlling the world, that's not, and they're stopping him from being living in a classical liberal society, that's not the same thing. See, because James is the only one that can discern objective reality. Only James can do that. So any other group that says that, they are wrong. And James is correct. It's funny how that works out, isn't it?
Who do these powerful things and control the world, or that the straights are these shadowy characters who do certain things and control the world. It's the same conspiracy theory, guys. It's literally the same model. So you got this kind of one species of kind of woke right that blames everything on the Jews. All right, that one wasn't complicated at all. Okay, the Jews are like the masterminds or whatever. They're the alien who alienates you as a Gentile or as anybody else is somehow, alienated from your true ability to.
Are you doing it in your head? Are you just replacing the things that he's saying and then putting in the things that James says about what's alienating him from achieving his fully awakened status as being able to live in a truly classical liberal society? Are you doing it? I call it James Lindsay standpoint epistemology. If you listen to James Lindsay enough and you believe everything he says, you essentially train yourself to view the world through James's lens. There is a very cult-like aspect to a lot of the people that like follow him, like really follow him. You can't criticize him. If people have criticized him, he has not listened to the criticisms because he has not changed his tactics or his stances one bit. So I don't think many of his followers criticize him. It's always interesting because when you're in a cult, you don't know it's a cult. You just think that you're being introduced and given a the true version of reality. So it's very hard. Like a lot of people, like I've talked to progressives who they go, I'll be like, just shit talking leftism. And they're like, oh, Patrick, I think that I know more about the left than you do because I've been in it for 60 years. And it's like, no, you're too in deep. You're too surrounded by it. You are too in your bubble to truly actually see it for what it is. And so I think it is with a lot of James Lindsay's followers. They're in too deep. They are stuck in his wizard's circle, and they cannot see past the sort of, imagine like an opaque shield, an opaque bubble, and they're all trapped in it. There's a giant human transmutation circle on the ground, and James Lindsay is standing in the middle of it. You could sort of see reality outside of that bubble, but you can't quite see it, and you can't quite make sense of it. Now, of course, none of us can see reality for what it actually is. There is an inherent mystery element built into reality, but you could escape a cult and not join another cult. You have to have a belief system. Hopefully it's a coherent belief system, but you want to know that it's a belief system. The people in James Lindsay's cult don't really know it's a belief system, similar to how the people in the woke cult, like you just say the leftist cult don't know it's a belief system, right? They have all these institutions reinforcing their worldview, right? And so, well, this is what I believe, and the institutions reinforce it. So that means that it's true. But of course, it's the institutions that have brainwashed these people into this worldview. The institutions are responsible for giving them their worldview, but they don't see it like that. It's similar to James. James Lindsay is responsible for giving the people in his cult this worldview, but they don't see it like that, and they can't see the forest through the trees. They can't see through that slightly opaque bubble to the world that is outside that. James Lindsay is basically running his own plantation at this point.
You live in society. There are more complicated expressions of this, like the ones that the Nazis took up, that the Jews are contaminating your society and your race. They didn't a woke racial ideology at the heart of their thing. We can talk about that, I guess. I don't want to get into all these details.
So I did want to divert here. Not divert, just add to it. Okay? I want to add to it. So this guy's name is Jonathan Newman, and I believe he's a more right-wing conservative Jewish person. You can see when he leans forward, there's a little yarmulke on top of his head. This is a Jewish man describing what tikkun olam is. Okay? Bear with me here.
Tikkun olam, and we'll come on to exactly what it means in a moment. This idea of tikkun olam is really the dominant form of identity for American Jews. It's in the life of an American Jew from cradle to grave. It's in books for infants, it's in curricula in primary school and secondary school, it's in extracurricular programs for teenagers and adolescents, it's in initiatives for students on campus and programs for young professionals, it's in synagogue. Jews will hear it, Jews in the pew will hear it from the pulpit, and they'll read about it in countless books and articles and magazines and journals. Liturgy in synagogues and temples in America has been adapted to incorporate or emphasize the concept, and American Jewish adults might join any number of Tikkun Olam committees in synagogues across the nation. And Tikkun Olam is, or rather the American Jewish adult, is living in a community that is shaped by grants from incredibly generous American Jewish philanthropies that are dedicated to Tikkun Olam. For example, the federations, which give an incredible $2 billion every year to charitable causes, the Jewish Funders Network, another $1 billion, and various other.
Now, I discussed this a little bit before, and I've discussed it in some other podcasts and some other episodes of the limiting principle. This man is describing how amongst the Jews, specifically, more Jews in America, Tikkun Olam is taught to them from birth. Tikkun Olam is in every single aspect of their raising. And the point that he makes is that to these Jewish people, Tikkun Olam is the religion. Tikkun Olam is their reason for their belief. Many Reformed Jews and atheistic Jews are raised in this. They're not religious in the classically Jewish religious sense, but they still have a reverence and religious-like adherence to Tikkun Olam. That's what he's saying, that Jewish people in America are brainwashed into this. Now, let's go over to our friend at ChatGPT. In the United States, a large majority of Jewish Americans identify with or lean towards the Democratic Party, typically around 2/3 to 3/4 of the Jewish population. So, a large majority, 66.67 or 75% of adult American Jews in America are on the left. They're leftists. The Democrats, they don't call themselves communists. They're Fabian socialists. They believe in these sort of slow incremental changes. However, they do love using their Marxist revolutionaries on the ground to terrorize society into giving in to their demands. At the end of the day, when you get past all the window dressing, the Democrats are communists. As I discussed before, Tikkun Olam, specifically the Lurianic Kabbalistic strain, is woke. It is that there is in the beginning, there was Ein Sof, a infinite nothingness, and it had an irritant, and then it had to expel the irritant, and expel the irritant, and then because of the irritant expelling, all of these different levels of reality were created. One of those levels of reality is our world, the material world, the planet Earth, and the universe. And when God expelled that irritant, little bits of pieces of God trickled down through these versions of reality, through these levels of reality, and were dispersed all over the material world. Now, Kabbalistic Tikkun Olam Jewish people believe that these little bits of God, these divine sparks, are hidden within what they call a shell or a klipoth. And by committing acts of what they often call social justice, they can unearth the divine sparks from within those shells. And once you unearth all of those divine sparks of those little bits of God, they eventually rise back up and go back to Ein Sof, the eternal nothingness. That is their cosmology, their origin story, and their eschatological project. The end of the world is unearthing these divine sparks. A lot of these woke Jewish people often talk about the material world as being evil because it is containing these bits of God. And so if you follow to its natural conclusion, once you unearth these divine sparks, there is no need for the material world. There is no need for the material world. And you combine that with this push for making everything digital, AI, connecting everyone, creating the new sphere, making us all of one mind. We are retracting from the material world. We watch everything on our TVs. We do everything on our phones. They want to get rid of movie theaters. They want to get rid of or lessen the amount of time and the ability of people, humans, to spend in the material world. This is what woke is, or at least it's one of the aspects of woke. There's also Gnosticism, and Hermeticism strewn throughout it, but this is largely what woke is. So that's what this man is saying. This Jewish man, he's specifically talking about the problematic aspects of Jewish Americans of worshiping Tikkun Olam, or as it's commonly known as now, as social justice. He's talking about that, and he wants to put a stop to it because he's not a communist, he's not a leftist, and he actually views these people as putting the Jewish people in danger, of putting Israel in danger. This is a Jewish man saying this. James Lindsay's talking about the demonization of Jews, people having genocidal rhetoric around Jews, all these horrible things. Is that a reality? Yes, of course. There's always going to be people that are doing that. But let's take a look at what James Lindsay posts about Jews on X. Here we have James Lindsay stating that Jews are the only tribe I know of that doesn't have any ambition to interfere with other tribes, only to be let alone to do their own things and not be subjected to terrorism, pogroms, and genocide. This is in direct conflict with what observable reality is. There are 2/3 or 3/4 of Jewish people that are leftists, that practice Tikkun Olam, that practice social justice, that want to heal the world in a woke way. This is observably true. This is subjectively true. That's what that Jewish man said. And yet James Lindsay says they're the only tribe that doesn't want to mess in other people's affairs. James Lindsay perceives Jewish people as a monolith. But then he also goes on to say, guys, don't fall for the lazy "it's the Jews" trap. Yeah, some Jews and Israelis are in the mix, but the real culprits are a massive globalist cabal, and many in it aren't Jewish. Pointing fingers at one group is sloppy thinking and lets the true bad guys off the hook. Stay sharp. That is 100% true. It is a bit of a trap to focus on one group because it is harder to get people on your side if you do that. The post-World War II consensus, the Holocaust, all of these things are amplified and used to call people anti-Semites, Jew haters. But then people actually end up becoming deranged about Jews to the point where they are obsessed about it in an unhealthy way. Okay? But so James Lindsay is acknowledging here that some Jews and Israelis are in the mix. Okay? But then at the same time, he says that they're the only tribe, the Jews as a whole, are the only tribe that doesn't mess in people's affairs. So James Lindsay knows that there are Jewish people that are woke. And yet at the same time, he says that they're also the only tribe that don't mess with people's affairs. This is a contradiction. He's holding two contradictory points in his head. What kind of cognitive dissonance must this create in his head? One of the key aspects of being woke is holding two contradictory positions in your head. The way that James Lindsay is sitting here posting this, the way that he posted this, looking at the Jewish people as a monolith, and then just throwing us a little bone by saying, yeah, of course, there's some Jews that are woke. There's some Jews that are globalists. That's like Brianna Wu, a trans radical activist, being completely pro-trans and being insane about trans people, and these TRAs in general being insane about trans people. But then once in a while she goes, oh yeah, there's a couple of trans people that are kind of crazy, right? He kind of throws you a bone. It's a bit of a Mott and Bailey, you know, like all Jews are good. They're all good and they don't interfere in people's businesses. And then he like kind of falls back, you know, to, well, there's some Jews that are bad. So James Lindsay, the way he views Jews is woke. I keep saying that James Lindsay is woke for Jews. Now, I'm not saying that advocating for Jewish people to not be harmed or hurt or engaging in any sort of representative like politics or whatever involving Jews is woke. But looking at a people as a monolith, purposely lying about how how the Jews are the only tribe that don't interfere in others' businesses, that's woke. That is like a insane leftist lying about the trans phenomenon and how it's being used to groom kids, mutilate kids, indoctrinate people into queer politics that are designed to upend society. Viewing people as a monolith based on their identity and lying, that is extremely woke. Which brings me back to this, when he talked about victimhood culture sucking. He's purposely engaging in dialectical antagonization by leaving Jewish people out of this, while at the same time, while also saying that it's because the character count, even though he can type thousands of words. He's purposely engaging in these deceptions, while at the same time there is a literal Jewish man trying to bring attention to the insane woke leftists who also are Jews. James Lindsay once said, oh, well, there's Jews that are communists. And he's like, well, they're not really Jews. They're communists. You know, their religion is communism. It's like, no, like, according to this Jewish man and what appears to be observable reality, no, the fact that they are communists, the fact that they're woke, the fact that they want to heal the world comes from Tikkun Olam, which stands for social justice. This conservative Jewish man, which I showed before, his name is Mr. Newman. He's great. There's actually a really awesome debate between him and a sort of like neoliberal Jewish man that is a sophist and provides cover for leftist Jewish people. There's this awesome debate, which I think I'm going to have to cover at one point on the podcast. This Jewish man is specifically trying to draw attention. He's devoted his entire career. He's written a book about this, about the destructive nature of Tikkun Olam, and how these Jews participate in woke victimhood culture in order to commit social justice. They'll call you an anti-Semite so you can't oppose them, in the same way that a trans person will call you a transphobe, a woke gay person will call you a homophobe, a woke black person will call you a racist. They're engaging in the same thing. Now, the thing is that James Lindsay's a liar. He knows all of this is true. I've talked to James. I've talked to his followers. James has not told me this specifically, but his followers have told me that the reason they never talk about the sort of like Jewish Tikkun Olam social justice influence in the woke movement is because they believe there is some sort of dialectical operation going on that is trying to essentially go and lead toward another pogrom and demonization of Jews. Now, there is something like that going on. There is some sort of targeting of Jewish people and looking at them as a monolith in order to demonize them and cast them as the sole reason for why society is in the shape that it is in. But I look at James as the two sides of the same dialectical coin. He's purposely lying. He knows that a large part of woke stems from Tikkun Olam. Not all of it, but a large part of it. He knows this. And yet he will call anyone an anti-Semite that tries to talk about that, while at the same time pretending that Jewish people are a monolith and they only do good things and don't interfere in other tribes, while at the same time also saying that there are some Jews that are engaged in globalist politics, communist politics, woke politics. He's constantly contradicting himself. This topic has driven him insane. And he's lying. The beginning of this podcast was designed to... So I was listening to his podcast, right? As you heard, listening to his podcast and trying to show you the way that he's emptied out the specifics and contents of what woke is. He's doing that in order so he can apply woke more broadly and call anyone that he doesn't like woke. Anyone that doesn't see the world through the lens that he sees it as woke. Now, do I think that everything that he was saying is woke? No. Like, there are some good tenets of classical liberalism. I like the idea of that there is a actual material reality outside of our own perceptions. and that we can use the scientific method in order to not exactly prove something, but do enough testing on it to where the results are so consistent that we could at least know that this thing is most likely true. I think that's a good method. Okay. You can't prove that it is decisively, conclusively true, but you can at least say that this is most likely true, and let's take it as basically being true. And if presented with other information, we can then adjust the way we run society. There are aspects of James Lindsay's philosophy that I enjoy. I don't adhere to it because I'm an Orthodox Christian. Those are different metaphysics. But the reason why I was trying to use his own words against him, to me, it was sophistry, right? And I think that if a lot of James Lindsay's followers would listen to this, they would accuse me of sophistry by trying to cast James as woke. But the purpose of using his own words against him was to try to highlight and expose his own sophistry. That by emptying out the contents of woke, you, based on your worldview, what you believe to be true, you can look at a different person with a different worldview and cast them as woke. And that's what I try to do with James. But his lies around the phenomenon of some Jewish people being woke and its origins, this is the definition, not the definition, but it is one of the overriding principles of what it means to be woke. Have an irrational attachment and fetishization of a group, lie about that group to provide cover for that group, and call anyone who ever calls out that group and what they do, call them a bigot. That is like one of the key defining factors of woke. That's why I keep saying that James Lindsay is woke for Jews. Now, again, going back, I'm not opposed to someone representing Jewish people and trying to represent their interests. I believe all the different groups can represent their interests, and other people in other groups could represent those groups' interests. I have no problem with that. But what happens when a white leftist lies about the issues in the Black populace, around critical race theory, about like all these different things? What happens if they lie about liberation theology and its influence in some Christian sectors of society and creating woke? What happens when a crazy white leftist, or just crazy leftists in general, lies about the grooming that is going on within the LGBTQ moniker and what they're doing to kids? It actually ends up fostering hatred towards those groups. It creates more conflict. That's what it does. And that's exactly what James is doing in regards to Jewish people. He's furthering the dialectic by doing this. He is immanentizing the eschaton. He is participating in accelerationism. The reason why I do these podcasts is not because I hate James. I used to talk to James all the time. I met James in person. I had the dude's cell phone number. But what he is doing is definitionally woke. It holds all of the contents of woke, speaking out for a group they view as marginalized, lying about that group because you're terrified that something bad is going to happen to that group. That's why when I say James says never again is now involving anything horrible happening to Jewish people, to me it's a thought-terminating cliche in the same vein as trans women are women. Imagine if James and this conservative Jewish man would work together, and James could release a series of podcasts about the manipulations involving the Jewish populace in America that would drive almost 75, if not a little bit more, whatever, 75% of them to being woke. Imagine if he would have laid out what Tikkun Olam is and how this concept has been bastardized to manipulate Jewish people and being woke in the same way they did with critical race theory and Black people, and queer theory with gay people and LGBTQ people, whatever we're going to call them. Imagine if he had did that, and he could have worked with this Jewish man to do that. Instead, he never talks about it. He knows about it. He's explicitly stated that he knows about it by saying that, yeah, some Jews are in the globalist mix, and yet he never talks about it, never goes into the details of it, never explains it. And then if anybody else tries to explain it, he just calls them woke. It's the definition of woke, guys. It is the definition of woke. And I guess I would say that at this point, it sort of seems as if James has gone too far. He's never going to come back from this abyss that he's descended into. He's going to bury his head in the ground. He's going to plant his feet firmly and keep pushing the exact same narrative. It sort of reminds me of like communist Russia. I'm going to butcher it, but what's the saying is that like the regime is lying to you. You as in the people. The people know that the regime is lying, and the regime knows that the people know that they are lying to them. Something like that. That's how I feel with James. Like, James is lying. I know that he's lying. James knows that I know that he's lying. But I feel as if I have an obligation to speak out against it. Because all he's doing is causing harm and making things worse. And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, James Lindsay is woke. I hope he changes course, but I don't see it happening. Thanks again for listening. This is the first episode of new derp courses. There will be more. I want them to be semi-regular. I'm not going to go out of my way and dig through everything of James Lindsay, but he's going to keep going down this path. He's going to keep becoming more and more unhinged from reality. So I'm sure there will be lots of content coming up for new derp courses. I hope you enjoyed listening. Thanks a lot, guys, and God bless. Derp, 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 derp,